near a closet. Right, Ann? Yeah, we got a birthday. We got a birthday girl up here. Yeah, we're gonna move.
Testing.
At home.
I apologize. We're just waiting for one board member to get on Zoom. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, the Finance and Business Development Committee meeting for July the 12th, 2022, and we're going to start with roll call, please.
Okay. Trustee Rose.
I am here.
Trustee Cunningham.
Here.
Trustee Giannoli on Zoom. She's muted, but I see her there. Lisa, can you hear us?
Here, yes, sorry.
Great. Okay. Trustee Jay is absent today, and we have Art Sperber filling in as an alternate.
Here.
We're going to
And-
have Trustee
and Trustee
Chair
Carey.
Carey fill in as an alternate as well.
Great.
Chair Carey, are you here?
Present.
Well, now that we have that complicated process completed, we will go to item number 2, public comment. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
Thank you very much. That takes us to 3.1, approval of the minutes, the June 7th, 2022 Finance and Business Development Committee meeting minutes. Does anyone have any concerns or change requests? If not, I would love to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. Item 4, information discussion and or possible action items. We have none this morning. So we're going to go to number 5, items recommended for approval by the full board. And I'm actually going to call item 5.3 first rather than 5.1, and then we'll head back to 5.1, 5.2, and 5.4. So 5.3 reads, Board Memo 072022-48, adoption of resolution number 559, approving a non-revolving credit agreement for the issuance of the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority Airport System Subordinate Lien Revenue Bonds, Series 2022, Subseries A, Subseries B, and Subseries C, in the maximum aggregate principal amount of $50 million and providing the effective date. No idea what that means, but Randy Carlton is going to present to us, and I'm sure he's going to explain it to me.
Good morning, Treasurer Rose, members of the Finance and Development Committee. My name is Randy Carlton. I'm the Chief Finance and Administration Officer. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning to discuss this program that we're bringing forward for board consideration on Thursday. It is the interim financing program, and the key word there is interim, which would suggest that this is an in-between step that we're taking to the larger plan of our long-term capital finance program. As you know, we are on the cusp of some significant capital investment here at RNO, and this is a key step in preparing our financing program for that. It's not the entire financing program, and in the coming years, I would say in the 2 to 3 year time frame, we'll be back with additional financing recommendations to address our longer term and larger scale needs of the airport. Discussion today will touch on these items here. I will review slightly some information that we discussed previously on February 8th with the Finance Committee in terms of how we go about financing our capital improvements. We have a specific plan of finance that we're recommending today for that interim period. I will introduce the financing team that we've been working with over the past few months to put the proposed plan together. We will discuss the selection process for the bank that's being recommended today, as well as the key terms of that proposal. That last comment there, public hearing is required. That's not for today. That is for Thursday, when the board will be asked to hold a public hearing that's consistent with the requirements of the federal tax law that provides for an opportunity for the public to provide testimony and comment whenever a public agency is about to issue debt. So that's the plan today, and of course, we can stop along the way and address any questions that you may have, or you can wait to the end. How we go about financing capital improvements. Well, there's a bit of what I call the toolbox of choices, and sometimes we use one, sometimes we use a combination of these choices. We have cash. We also know that cash is limited, and cash is very, very important to an airport when times of liquidity. We saw this through the pandemic crisis where we were drawing upon our liquidity. And fortunately, CARES and other legislation stepped in to help us through that period of time. We do have a day's cash on hand requirement. It's a board policy to meet a target of 365 days. That's the theoretical number that should the cash just stop, how much cash do we have to sustain our operations? There are a number of federal programs. AIP, Airport Improvement Program, funds about 93% of our hardscape or runways, things of that nature that are eligible for those type of dollars. There are other grants that we consider and apply for. Federal earmarks are always welcomed. There is a federal loan program called TIFIA. We do look at that, and if there's an eligible use of that, we would bring that into the mix as well. There are long-term and short-term type of bonds that airports issue. And of course, there are other sources, and I also kid about this is the category where if there's a rich uncle, we would welcome those monies, or anybody else who wants to come forward through perhaps our federal legislative delegation or state delegation, that we could obtain any other funding sources that might be of use to us. There is considerations that we always take into account when we finance our capital projects. How much cash do we have? How much would be prudent to use? How much debt to issue? We need to be concerned about the type of debt and the amount of debt, so that we're not so constrained physically that we are concerned about the rates that we have to put in place to pay that debt back, because we all know that airports is a competitive business model, and we have to keep our rates at a level that will continue to support air service here at RNO. But today, we're going to spend time talking about this particular category of interim and short-term bonds. The proposed plan that we are recommending today is a short-term borrowing. It's a bank note, and it will provide the financing alternative that we will utilize over the next 3 years, and it's set at $50 million. And a key question there: why $50 million? It could be 25, it could be 75, but for the purposes of starting this program, we looked at what our cash requirements may be over the coming 2 to 3 year period, and we zeroed in on 50 million would be a reasonable number. We could always increase that if we felt that we had the need at the time. This particular type of program provides an ideal amount of flexibility. As Treasurer Rose was reading the subject, she was mentioning Series A and Series B and Series C. Well, these are 3 different types of bonds that this particular tool will enable us to issue based upon the type of investment we're making. Some type of investments are not eligible for a tax-exempt type of bond, and others require a taxable type of bond to finance the improvement. And the key example would be if it's a private enterprise that is operating on airport property, then that's a type of use that would require a taxable type bond. So we have maximum maximum flexibility with the structure that we're proposing to issue any amount within that $50 million of whether it's tax exempt or taxable type bonds. This is really just a bridge loan, so to speak, to get us through the next 2 to 3 years until we have our long-term financial plan in place to finance our concourse redevelopment project. So, the scope of that project is, in that $500 to $600 million range. We haven't settled in on what that number is, what that requirement is yet, but we know it will be significant. And we know that it will require long-term bonds to in part finance. So we will be in that point in time where we know what our long-term bond picture looks like in that 2 to 3 year time period. And at that time, when we issue those long-term bonds, whatever amount of this short-term borrowing is outstanding, we will roll into that long-term borrowing. So right sizing, I say that because we're not obligated for, well, let me say it another way. One approach is to go out and issue, X million number of bonds, and then those bonds sit in a bank account and you draw them down as you need it. This works a little bit like a construction loan, if you will, where we have a credit amount where we can draw from, and we pay the interest on the amount that we draw. There's also another fee that I'll get into in a moment called a commitment fee, just to have that facility in place. I say a hedge against interest rates because, as you know, we're in a rising interest rate environment, and the interest rate on these type of bonds, they're set on the short term, and they reset each month based upon where interest rates are at that time. So we're able to ride the interest rate fluctuations as they come and go without locking into a long-term interest rate that could be very high in the current market.
Ask you a quick question about that.
Sure.
That was one of my questions. How often do they reset on the rate? Are there any parameters on maximum amount it can go up, or any sureties there at all?
Okay, so it will reset on a monthly basis, and it's at the short end of the yield curve, and I'll explain how that index works. There isn't a maximum per se, but theoretically, it's not going to be anything longer than a long-term bond type of transaction would be otherwise. This last point is eligible for CARES Act. You may recall in some of my earlier comments at either of the board workshops on the budget that a bit of a unique and creative way of using our CARES Act money is to issue debt and to pay that debt off with CARES, because debt service is an eligible use of CARES Act funds. Now, another way to use CARES Act is a far more complicated way, and that would be to go through the FAA addendum process to receive approval for a capital improvement, where this gives us a very streamlined approach to where we can finance a capital improvement and then turn around and use the CARES Act to pay that off. And we have about $20 million of CARES Act funds outstanding that haven't been earmarked for anything specific yet, other than to pay this debt off during that 3-year period. The commitment fee, I mentioned that earlier, and I'll show you that and how that works when we get into the terms of the banknote. There are some considerations too for short term, and we need to be aware of the pros and cons of any type of significant financial decision. And so there is what we'll call a takeout risk. It's a risk. First, I'll say that I'm comfortable with recommending. It's the type of risk that in that 2 or 3 year period, and these notes do become due in 3 years, and they have to be paid off in 3 years. There are some parameters for which it can be extended for an additional 3 years. However, the idea is to pay this off within 3 years. But the takeout risk is, will there be market access for the airport authority to issue those long-term bonds 2 or 3 years down the road? I say yes. I think it's a reasonable risk for the authority to be taking, that the capital markets, they're very efficient. They will provide us with the access to issue those long-term bonds at that point in time. The financing team that assisted us in putting this transaction together, we have PFM Financial Advisors. Brian Gallucci, I believe, is on virtually. I know he'll be here with us on Thursday. He was assisted by Eric Heidel, and our bond counsel firm, Sherman & Howard, Ryan Henry, David Lucas. Ryan is on with us virtually. General counsel, of course, Ann Morgan here, has been involved in the transaction, reviewing the documents, approving them as to form. A little bit about the bank selection process, just to give you a recap. PFM did a solicitation and sent it to the 35 banks that are in this space of issuing short-term type credit, short-term type bonds. We did receive 4 qualified proposals from the list is there. It's BMO Harris Bank, JP Morgan Chase, US Bank, and Wells Fargo Bank. PFM analyzed all the proposed terms, reviewed them with staff, And we narrowed the field down to two of the leading banks, which was J.P. Morgan and Wells Fargo. There were continued negotiations to fine-tune the terms, and in the final analysis, the proposal from Wells Fargo was just slightly better than the J.P. Morgan proposal, but they were both very, very competitive, very good proposals for the authority. Wells Fargo Bank, a name you're familiar with. They are a bank that provides this type of lending program to cities, counties, other special purpose agencies and airports. They have a strong local presence. They are a local bank. They have strong credit ratings. So we are very pleased that Wells Fargo is agreeing to partner with us and to bring forward such a strong financial position to assist us in this effort. You'll see that there are a few other examples from airports that have similar programs that Wells Fargo has worked with. All right, here's some of the terms and some of the details. This type of transaction is authorized by the Nevada revised statutes. It's a non-revolving 3-year loan of up to $50 million. Now, that word non-revolving, the counter to that would be revolving, right? So what's different? Well, if you think of it as a traditional letter of credit, as you pay back the amounts that you draw, your credit limit goes back up. In the state of Nevada, however, public agencies do not have that alternative to have a revolving type of loan. So it has to be structured in a non-revolving manner. Now, that's not to say that should we get close to that 50 million and we will require more, we can always go back to the bank. We could always do a new process to obtain an additional level of authorization. Okay, so commitment fee, 20 basis points on the undrawn amount. That's going to be paid just to have this facility in place. And that is a competitive rate. That was the lowest rate of the group. So the dollar amount there is $100,000 a year. Now that amount will go down as we draw from that 50, and the amounts that we draw will have a different interest rate attached to it. The interest cost on the drawn amounts, depending upon the type of bonds that I talked about earlier, whether it's taxable or tax exempt, will have different indexed levels. And so that acronym there that you see, SOFR, that is now the leading index for short-term type borrowing instruments. It used to be LIBOR. And if you recall Trustee Jay asking about this in our earlier conversations, he was asking, well, what's going to happen, if you're going to have a replacement with LIBOR? And indeed, we do have a replacement for LIBOR, and it's called SOFR, which stands for the Secured Overnight Financing Rate. The way this works is you see the rate there at the last bullet point of 1.45%. So whether it's the tax exempt, and probably most of these will be the tax exempt draws, the way the math works is you simply take the 80% of the 1.45 and you add the 46 basis points. So we always know exactly what this will cost the moment that we entered into any type of draw. And we anticipate having draws maybe every quarter. We will look back on our actual expenses and milestones that we've reached on our capital projects, and we will then draw down, reimburse ourselves. And that's another key reason for having our cash liquidity where it is, because we can self-finance in the interim before we do these draws. Based upon what it is, it may be something that we pay back with CARES Act, and it may be something that we just keep outstanding and use to roll into that longer-term bond transaction I was describing earlier.
Just clarify one point, please. So if I'm understanding correctly, the commitment fee of 20 basis points is fixed. It doesn't change through the term. Just the SOFR rate fluctuates. Is that correct?
That's spot on. All right, so those were the details of the terms, and I'm happy to address any questions or concerns that you may have. The recommendation from staff is that we move forward with Resolution 559, which will authorize the authority and authorize staff to close this transaction on August 2nd. So that is the recommendation, and would be happy to entertain any questions from you or Trustee Gianoli, who's joining us remotely.
Yes, and I know Trustee Gianoli has a few questions. I have one quick one for you, and then I'm going to move to her because I know she has to get off the line, and then I'll open it up to everybody if you guys don't mind. When are you anticipating, and for what project are you anticipating that we would take our first draw?
We anticipate the first draw will be the ticketing hall redevelopment expansion project. We have, in particular, we're looking at the HVAC system and the roof elements of that project to use for this funding, and then we will turn around and pay that off with CARES Act money. So the interest cost will stop at that point.
Okay, Trustee Gianoli, do you want to go ahead and ask your questions, please?
Yes, thank you. Randy, I just have a couple questions. I'm assuming that each time you do a drawdown, they'll come back to the board and we'll go through a scenario, what the plan is, what the payback plan, timeline, and whatnot will be for each one of these draws.
We can do that, Trustee Gianoli, if that's the will of the committee. This particular tool is intended to give us the direction to utilize as needed on a day-to-day basis within the parameters authorized today of up to $50 million. I would be, if that is an interest, keep in mind that we want to move, we want to be nimble as possible and to pay for our capital expenditures timely. We can always use our cash and pay ourselves back, but I would recommend that you authorize us with the flexibility to do this on an as-needed basis and to keep the Finance Committee well informed, and I can do that each month, if you will, during the process of our operating financial results, and I think that would make a lot of sense to include a section in that report.
Yeah, that makes sense because it kind of defeats the purpose of why you have it. If you can't move quickly and you have to wait a month, those doors shut quickly. But I think that having some kind of reporting back to us is probably valuable to us, just so we know, what the plan is. Are you going to take it out for a year, 2 years? I think that's just good understanding for us to have.
Thank you for that feedback.
Okay. Otherwise, I guess each scenario is going to be different. Sometimes you may only need a bridge for a year, maybe less than that. But so each one, depending on how everything falls into place, each one will probably be unique, I would assume.
That's right. So, there's roughly 20 million of unallocated CARES Act remaining. So as we draw down amounts that we intend to pay back through the CARES Act, that amount of debt will just be wiped off the books, and the interest would stop. Now, any amounts greater than 20 million that we do not repay from cash or other sources will stay outstanding and will be the amount that will roll forward in our long-term bond transaction when we're approaching that in the 2 to 3 year time period.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks for the presentation. It was helpful, and it's an interesting tool to use in these times, and certainly does give us some latitude to move when we need to move. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gianoli. So I have to play devil's advocate here just for a minute. During the last very, very long recession or Great Depression or whatever it is you want to call that, a lot of projects started for different, government agencies and whatnot, and they were unable to complete or finish or continue because the recession went on long and it was hard. What is our thought process on how the looming recession may impact this plan?
That's a very good question, and it's certainly on the minds of everyone. That's whether you're a concessionaire working here at the airport, or an employee, or a contractor. Recessions do have a tendency, however, to improve construction pricing. So that just take that as an anecdotal comment from me, having had experience of living through recessions and seeing what it does to capital programs. Contractors can become more competitive provided the raw materials are available. So that's just one comment aside. The other is who we partner with, and do they have the financial wherewithal and viability to finish a project that they start. There's no 100% guaranteed answer I can give you on that, other than to say that when we do our selection process and choose our partners with our contractors, we do take reasonable steps to shore up that risk through vetting what contractors are going to be awarded the work, as well as the performance bonds that are required to fulfill those obligations. So there are some strategies we have, but I cannot give you any kind of guarantee that we won't have complications as a result of the recession. We also want to be mindful that we have a lot going on at the airport at the same time, and we'll be managing multiple projects consecutively, and we have to measure and be prepared for the impact on the passenger experience and the flow of passengers and traffic at the airport. And I have all the confidence in our planning and engineering department to work through those challenging issues and to keep the board appraised of any concerns.
Trustee Cunningham.
Thank you. I think it is a great tool for this organization to use, especially considering where we are in the capital and construction projects that we have coming on. A couple quick questions. One, you indicated that the commitment fee with Wells Fargo is $100,000. How did that compare to some of the other banks that had submitted interests?
Well, thank you for that question. And as I indicated earlier, it was very competitive. And we found that the commitment fee was just a basis point, which is, just 0.1% differences in some of the terms that were submitted. So, it was largely a financial decision in recommending Wells Fargo, because they were just, a 1 basis point better than the cover proposal. So they were all in there. JP Morgan and Wells were it was a real horse race at the end, and Wells Fargo is the slightly better proposal.
Thank you. My other question is, what are your concerns? Where's our exposure truly?
That's a good question as well. Where is our exposure? Well, so we're putting together long-term financial plans, now to look at how we're going to fund, how we're going to finance our major capital. We're looking at a number of things. Like the Conrack facility, is a bit different. That is all privately financed, and that's not going to require really any financial commitment of our bonding capacity to fulfill that project. But all the other projects that we've been discussing within the category of more RNO, or the concourse redevelopment project, those will have significant financial consequences on our airport. We have to, put together a financing plan that satisfies the interests of the airlines, satisfies the interests of the capital markets, satisfies the interests of rating agencies. We want to bring you the most cost-effective, cost-efficient form of financing for these longer-term projects that we can put together without constraining us so much with a lot of debt, which is another lesson learned from the pandemic, where our counterparts at other my counterparts at other airports were, it was all about the debt. It was all about using, every bit of resource to pay the debt, because simply we do not go into default on these bonds, and we have to make it a priority to pay bonds back. And there were no defaults whatsoever, throughout the country of airport revenue bonds, and thankfully we had federal resources to help in that regard. So my concern, I'm kind of a bit of a long-winded, answer, is to find that sweet spot of what's reasonable for us, the airport, what's reasonable for the airlines as well, because this is a symbiotic relationship we have. They do well, we do well, we do well, and they do well, and we have to have a reasonable amount of debt that they're willing to support, and that's a decision yet that we have to sort through and bring back to the board.
Thank you very much.
Trustee Sperber, Trustee Carey, do you have any questions? Questions. I have one more question. You're going to love this one. Is it our intention to use some of our days cash on hand during this process, or do we intend to leave it all there and use this non-revolving line of credit?
Right now, our days cash on hand is about 529. Board minimum policy is 330, and there is a board target set at 365. So when we look across, the airport industry, that's on the low side. The 365 is on the low side. So we are going to do what we can to keep that days cash on hand number at that robust level of fives, maybe high fours. We will be using some of our cash undoubtedly, but we use it as a financing source because we often front the cost of our capital projects and then pay ourselves back when grant money it comes in to repay those outflows. So I would expect it to decline, but I'm going to always be a voice for keeping that number at a level that's sufficient to give us that investment grade bond rating when that time comes for us to approach the rating agencies and to put our best foot forward from a credit standpoint. That is a key metric that is looked at for airports, and to have a sustainable and high within the median of other airports days cash on hand level is an important thing, and we're in a good position right now to demonstrate that strength.
That's why they say cash is king.
Exactly.
He
who has the cash.
You can never get hurt by having too much money, right? Okay, so I think the one thing looming here for me was the question that Trustee Giannoli asked in regards to would draws come back to the board or not. I'm not super comfortable making that call and requesting that you do or don't do that without hearing the voice of the entire board. So I'm going to advocate for the fact that we move this forward to Thursday, and that question comes up with everybody, and we can see what the consensus is at that point. If everyone's in agreement with that, if you have a strong feeling one way or another about it, speak now or hold your peace till Thursday. We're good? Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? I don't think Trustee Gianoli is still there, but if you are, let me know. Trustee Gianoli, do you have any last final questions or thoughts?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, great. Then we can entertain a motion, please.
I will move that we move to adopt Resolution 559 approving a non-revolving credit agreement for the issuance of the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority Airport System Subordinate Lien Revenue Bonds, Series 2022, Subseries A, Subseries B, Subseries C, in the maximum aggregate principal amount of $50 million, and providing the effective date is at August
August 2nd.
August
Yes.
2nd.
That was my question. I
22.
forgot.
And then how do I, Ann?
You don't have to do anything else.
And that's it. We'll, that's my motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. Randy, thank you very much for being patient and answering all the questions and for the presentation. I am going to ask that you do the presentation again on Thursday just so everyone can see it and get final questions answered. So just heads up.
Thank you for your attention on this matter.
Okay, that's going to bring us back up to 5.1, Board Memo 072022-46, authorization for the President CEO to award a contract for the purchase of a Bucker. Is that right? Anybody know? Okay. Bucker Municipal City Cat 5006 compact sweeper to Bucker Municipal North America in the amount of $259,619. And we are going to hear from Mr. Dave.
Good morning. Treasurer Rose,
Good morning.
Randy, rest of you board members. I'm not as polished as Randy, so I'll do my best. So Bucher, sorry to correct you, but yeah, it took me a while too. It's not as easy to figure out some names nowadays. So the purpose of this action is to authorize the president and CEO to execute a purchase for one Bucher Municipal City Cat 5006 compact sweeper for the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority's Airfield Maintenance Department with Bucher Municipal North America. So there's a picture of the sweeper that we're going to purchase. It's like I said before, it's a Municipal City Cat 5006. It comes with a front-mounted broom and a pressure washing system and a wandering hose. This existing equipment that we have is a 2003 Tennant 830 compact sweeper with a front-mounted brush and wandering hose. The purchase price of this back in 2003 was $102,000, but with a lifetime repair cost currently at $115,000 and continuing to rise. The equipment is obsolete, and as it's no longer manufactured by Tennant, and it's making it harder for us to procure parts. The fiscal impact, $259,619 for the chassis and the body. Grand total for this purchase will be $259,619. The approved budget is $270. We'll have to purchase an aviation radio and a few other little things for it to get it completely outfitted. And we'll be utilizing a joiner type contract through Sourcewell Cooperative Purchasing Solutions for the procurement of this equipment. We've used that in the past. It works really well because it's already been bargained for the lowest price, and makes it much easier on all of us. And the recommended motion is, it is hereby moved that the board authorizes the president and CEO to award a contract for the purchase of one Bucher Municipal City Cat 5006 sweeper to Bucher Municipal North America in a not to exceed amount of $259,619. Anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions? Trustee Cunningham.
I just have a question on the maintenance agreement. Is that a purchase that you make separately, or
We'll maintain it in-house,
that's great.
yes.
It's a cute little vehicle.
It is cute.
Also nice about this one, the old one was basically a kick broom and a conveyor belt. This one's pure vacuum, so the kick broom was an expense that we had to replace on a regular basis. With this one, the front brushes don't use as much pressure because they're just kind of kicking it into the vacuum. So it should be a little less maintenance. Plus, 1-year warranty with a new purchase, and then hopefully go for a while before it really needs any major repairs.
Like a great improvement.
Yes.
Not only is it cute, but I've never heard of a wandering hose before, so that was a new thing to learn about. I'm envisioning it in my head right about now. I know. I'm like, where's it going? Sorry, I digress. Does anyone else have any questions? Nope. Okay. How about we get a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Five point two, Board Memo 07-2022-47, Adoption and Resolution Number 558, amending Resolution Number 556, establishing the airport rates and charges for fiscal year 2022-23 to allow for a phase-in of the rate increase as to scheduled shuttles and to fix a clerical error. This is for possible action, and we have a presentation by Brandon.
Good morning, Treasury
Good
Rose
morning.
and Board. So today I've got before you a new master fee resolution. It's more of just two amendments. Just as a catch up, the airport per NRS Chapter 474 allows us to do fees, rates, and rentals. Really, it's just to be self-sustaining. I'm sure you've all seen this before. And the master fees updated yearly to coincide with the budget, and it lists all of our fees and charges. So really what we're looking at in the changes that we had from just 2 months ago with Resolution 556 that was approved back in May. You saw that we did those public parking rate increases as well as the ground transportation increases. Really, one of the main points of that ground transportation increase was to remove a flat rate fee that we were offering out of $800 per month, which allowed our GT operators to come and go as many times in a month paying that base rate. We wanted to, that wasn't really industry standard. Really, everyone's at a per fee basis. So we wanted to move towards that. And based on that recommendation, the board approved the scheduled shuttles category, which allowed a $2 per trip fee for those categories. We went back to the GT providers and let them know of these changes. It was about a 30-plus day notice. Unbeknownst to me, that this is something I should have known, so I'll take the brunt there, is that their budgeting is on a calendar year. So this is going to be a significant increase for them on their GT invoices. So they were going from $800 to somewhere in the range between $1,800 to $2,400 a month. So it was a significant increase, and it wasn't my intention to not allow them to budget for that, but unfortunately we didn't give them ample notice for the significant increase. So speaking with the GT operators in this category, we've looked at a more phased-in approach, still being at that per trip rate, so they understand that they are going to be charged at a per trip rate, but phase it in starting with this fiscal year at $1, and then letting them know that we will be coming back and changing it to the $2 per trip when we relook at the master fee resolution next fiscal year. And so on historical trends, they're still going to see about a 50% increase. So go from $800 between $1,200 and $1,400 a month on those GT fees. So I'll stop there if you have any questions, because next part. Any questions on that? Great. And then the other small clerical error is, getting out of my wheelhouse, but As explained to me, the auto rental service facility building rent, there was a lease for the land rent and then the actual building rent, and the descriptions were the same, and they were intended to be different. So that's been corrected as well in the master fee resolution to reflect those differences as well. So short and sweet. So we recommend adopting the revised master fee resolution number 558 for fiscal year 22-23. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I actually had questions, but you've answered them all. So does anyone else have any questions? Okay, all right. I will entertain a motion, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you very much.
Long ways.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to 5.4, Board Memo 072022-51, authorization for the President CEO to purchase equipment and implementation services related to the installation of a common use passenger processing system, or also referred to as CUPS, project at Reno in the amount of $449,190. And our presenter today is Adam.
Good morning, Finance Committee, Chair Rose, trustees, happy to be here. So, purpose of the action today is request authorization to purchase equipment and implementation services for a common use system at RNO. Sounds kind of benign, but this is actually pretty exciting, which I'll get to as we go through.
Sounds so exciting.
And just as note, this is exempt from competitive bidding pursuant to NRS code 332115. And you'll see why that makes sense as we go through it as well. And it supports strategic priority number 3, facilities for the future. So kind of the background, we've been having pretty significant constraints in both the gate and both the ticket hall and at the gates. And we started to look at solutions to that. You know, we're expanding the ticket hall, obviously, as well, and the gates are a little bit different as far as what we can do. But one of the easiest things to provide more flexibility is to implement a common use system on those gates, at least the non-leased gates. It'll also provide more flexibility as we go through the more RNO projects that we'll be having for the next 5 to probably 8 years. And it's a very proven technology, common use. If you pardon my really bad joke, it's really common. So just the CETA system alone is in use at over 350 airports worldwide. And they're just one of there's 2 leaders. CETA is one of them, and it's very common. It's more common outside of the U.S. than it is here. Oh, forget the most important part of this slide is the pictures. So that's our gate up at Charlie 11. That's kind of how we're doing a hardwired common use system where 3 different airlines have a bunch of equipment. It's not very efficient. It doesn't look very nice, and it's not good for airlines or for the passenger experience. Down in the bottom right there, that's what we'll end up with. Obviously, we're looking at the other side, but it's 2 workstations, and the airlines literally just click on whatever icon is theirs, and it logs them into their system. And it makes it so any airline can use any of the 9 gates that we're going to do this on initially. So yes, but exactly. And so just a little bit more about the current situation here. We don't have any kind of common use technology in place. We have 12 airlines in the terminal. 6 of those airlines lease specific gates and ticket counters. The rest use unleased gates and ticket counters, and they pay a fee per flight, essentially.
So is that why you're only doing 9?
Correct, yes. So we have a very hard, the way we're doing things now is not very flexible, and the 9 unleased gates will give us so much more flexibility. Right now, there are certain airlines that don't lease the gates. They kind of appear like they do because they have fixed equipment on them, but it's the only way to enable their ability to use those gates. This will allow those 6 airlines to kind of flex around as needed, and it would also allow the 6 airlines that lease gates to use those gates as well when they have more flights. So we completed a study back in April of 2022 to kind of give us a guide on how to go about implementing common use at the airport here. And we're using that as our roadmap as we go forward. Again, it'll benefit all the airlines because even Southwest or American, who leases gates, end up using a lot of unleased gates throughout the day, depending on their flight schedule and if they would expand. So it gives a lot of flexibility. So why are we going with SETA? We already have all of the flight departure screens that have the arrivals and departures. That's all from SETA already. So they're already an existing provider for us of that technology. They also provide the visual paging systems, which it goes onto the flight displays as well. So there's a lot of synergies there, and it'd also be very expensive to go out and find a different company to integrate or to have to change out all of that in addition to what that would have to work on the common use platform. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's a much more seamless experience to keep it all with one vendor. Again, we also did a study or a survey with our internal airlines here to see what provider they prefer for common use, and we identified that this would be a good solution. And there is a majority support for SETA, so it's another reason why we're choosing them. And they also have a lot of future-proof technology. They'll be able to upgrade and update things as we move forward and technology changes. The biometric stuff that they kind of showed on the right there, and the self-bag drop are just a couple examples of those. And who knows what requirements will change over time too. So this will really help us future-proof and be able to adapt to that a lot easier on the system. And SETA has been around since 1949. They actually were started by 11 member airlines to work on shared infrastructure. So they've been doing this for 70 years, And they claim to touch, in some capacity, 90% of the world's airline business. So they know what they're doing. And here you can see the financial impact of $449,190 is part of phase one. This is the technology component. There'll be a second part of it that involves some mill work and some additional things, but it's all approved in the budget, and we anticipate it coming in budget. So here the specific items are buying some hardware, software, and then support, and the total amount of $449,190. And that's it. That's the recommendation there. So happy to field any questions you guys might have.
Super cool. I love it. Trustee Cunningham has a question, please.
Well, I see the Air Service Development Team bobbing their heads in support, and that's the only endorsement I need. It makes your job a little bit easier. I am fully in support of it and anxious to buy it as soon as possible. No questions. Thank you.
You might have already said it during the presentation, and I'm sorry I might have missed it, but what is the time frame for the installation of this?
Well, so we are going to be implementing a portion of it in August. The whole thing will be to get all of the 9 gates and the ticket counters up. It's kind of up to the supply chain to some extent, because we have a second component of this, which is some new millwork that we have to purchase. And it's not, it's not as simple as going to the furniture store and all that. I wish it was. So we got to do a little bit of design, and then we need to go out and procure that. So I'm hoping in 6 months we'll have it up and going.
Oh.
And I'm optimistic it might be less, it might be a little more, but the way things are today, it's a little hard to say with certainty. But as soon as we can.
Ms. Iftiger, would you like to chime in?
I would add something to great job, Adam. Thank you, Tina Iftiger, for the record. We need this to enable Spirit to start operating here. If we don't have this, Spirit won't be here until we do have it. So this was budgeted and contemplated by our IT team at a different pace, but when Spirit came, it changed the pace. So they have done a phenomenal job. Marty Mueller's here representing, but Art Ramp and Randy's team and purchasing have done a phenomenal job of turning this on a dime so that we can have Spirit up and running in August. And so this is a critical path item for us. Again, contemplated in budgeting that it would could just be one phase. Now we've got the bridge phase, which is to get Spirit up. And this is a critical path week. One, the board approval, and two, all the visits from their technology department with our technology department making this happen. So I want to thank Adam and the entire team for making this happen, because we wouldn't be getting Spirit in August if it wasn't for this.
Is it going to help us get Hawaiian Airlines?
Well, Hassan has
Sorry.
promised me this for 2 Junes now. I'm just teasing him.
I'm still waiting too.
We actually are in active conversations with a few different carriers about this. But as you know, staffing shortages with pilots and ground handling, they are getting new equipment could enable it. So we're crossing our fingers for 2024, maybe. No. I didn't put it in his performance goals, but. So anyway, I just thought you should understand how important this technology is, because there's the other way of adding capacity is a capital project. Well, we don't have time for that. And this will get us better utilization of all of our facilities so that we can entertain more carriers. And to our air service development team's credit, we have 97% of all domestic carriers now with Spirit coming in.
Wow.
So, yay for you.
It sounds very exciting.
I just wanted you to know how important this was.
Thank you all for working on it. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions? All right, let's do it then.
I would love to move that we authorize the president and CEO to purchase equipment and implementation services related to the installation of a common use passenger processing system project at RNO in the amount of $449,190.
Thank you, and happy birthday, Rose.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. I was trying to forget it was my birthday, but then Ann told me a really great story about how not having a birthday would be a lot worse than having a birthday. So I'm going to see the positive side of this thing. She definitely put it in perspective for me. Okay, so that takes us to number 6, member comments, questions, and requests for future agenda items. I am just going to tentatively say that we'll request an item for updates on the non-revolving line of credit, and until we'll see what the board says on Thursday. But let's just assume we're doing that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay, and monthly administrative reports 7.1 through 7.3. Does anyone have any questions or need additional information? Okay, seeing none. Don't worry, Art, I won't forget you. Let's call for public comment, please.
No public comment.
All right, thank you very much. No public comment. Okay, Trustee Sperber, can you please let us know when you'd like to start your construction meeting?
I'd like to start at 10:15.
At 10:15. Okay, with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
That was smooth, huh?
Recording stopped.
Went smooth.